Every war starts the same way. Flags waving, speeches about freedom, justice, and sovereignty. Leaders promise it'll be over quickly. The public believes them. But then, it isn't. Weeks become months, months become years, and somewhere, in the background, quietly, invisibly, something strange starts to happen. While soldiers die, while families flee, while whole economies collapse, someone is making an absolute fortune. This isn't a conspiracy theory, it's economics. And once you see the pattern, you'll never watch a war the same way again. Because here's the brutal truth nobody wants to say out loud. The longer a war lasts, the richer certain people get. When a war stretches from months into years and years into decades, the true victors never wear uniforms. They don't sleep in the mud, and they don't dodge shrapnel. The absolute winners of protracted wars wear tailored suits. They sit on the boards of defense contractors. They walk the polished halls of political lobbying firms, and they trade human lives for shareholder dividends. To understand the corruption of the long war, we have to start with a man who fought in it, commanded them, and eventually exposed them. Major General Smedley Butler. In 1935, after becoming one of the most decorated Marines in American history, Butler wrote a short, explosive book titled War is a Racket. Butler realized a terrifying truth about modern industrialized conflict. A short war is a political tool. A long war is an economic engine. Think about the sheer logistics of a multi-year conflict. An army of 500,000 men needs to be fed every single day. They need their boots replaced, their uniforms stitched, and their rifles oiled. They need millions of rounds of ammunition, thousands of gallons of jet fuel, and an endless supply of bandages, vehicles, and replacement parts. War is the ultimate consumer good because the product is designed to be destroyed. If you're a manufacturer, a long war is a dream scenario. You have a captive buyer, the government, which has an unlimited budget, no time to negotiate, and a desperate daily need for your product. This isn't a modern conspiracy. It is a historical constant. The blueprint for war profiteering was perfected over a century ago, and the political elite have been cashing in ever since. As the 20th century progressed, the politicians and the profiteers got smarter. They realized that selling weapons was incredibly lucrative, but providing services for a long war was a blank check. Enter the era of the Vietnam War and the advent of the cost-plus contract. In a standard business contract, a company bids a fixed price to do a job. If they go over budget, they lose money. But in a cost-plus contract, the government agrees to pay the company for every single dollar they spend on a project, plus a guaranteed percentage of profit on top of it. During the Vietnam War, a Texas-based construction company called Brown & Root, which would later become KBR, a subsidiary of Halliburton, was awarded massive, uncompetitive contracts to build roads, bases, and ports in South Vietnam. How did a Texas company get a monopoly on military construction in Southeast Asia? It might have had something to do with the fact that Brown & Root had been the primary financial backers of a Texas politician named Lyndon Johnson since the 1930s. When Johnson became president and escalated the Vietnam War, his biggest political donors received billions of dollars in government contracts to pave the war zone. The longer the quagmire lasted, the more concrete they poured, and the richer they became. Following the tragic events of 9/11, the United States launched a global military campaign that will last 20 years, span multiple countries, and cost an estimated $8 trillion. But where did those trillions go? They didn't go to the veterans, many of whom returned home to underfunded hospitals and a broken VA system. They went to the private sector. The war on terror saw the unprecedented privatization of the military. By the height of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, there were more private contractors on the ground than active-duty military personnel. The government outsourced everything: cooking meals, washing laundry, driving trucks, maintaining weapons, and even pulling the trigger. Let's look at Halliburton, the oilfield services and engineering company. In the lead-up to the Iraq War, Vice President Dick Cheney was one of the loudest voices advocating for the invasion. Before becoming vice president, Dick Cheney was the CEO of Halliburton. When the US invaded Iraq, Halliburton's subsidiary, KBR, was awarded a $7 billion no-bid contract to restore Iraq's oil infrastructure and provide logistical support to the military. No bid means no other companies were even allowed to compete for the job. The waste was astronomical. Contractors were found abandoning $80,000 trucks in the desert because they had a flat tire, knowing the government would just buy them a new one under a cost-plus contract. And then there were the private military companies, or PMCs. Companies like Blackwater provided mercenary armies to protect diplomats and secure facilities. These private soldiers were paid exponentially more than US Marines doing the same job, and they operated in a legal gray area, immune from the uniform code of military justice. Take the war in Ukraine. Since February 2022, the US alone has sent over $60 billion in military aid to Ukraine. A huge chunk of that goes straight to American defense contractors like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and Northrop Grumman. Lockheed Martin produces the HIMARS rocket system, one of the most critical weapons in Ukraine's arsenal. In 2022, the year the war escalated, Lockheed's stock price surged over 30%. Their CEO's compensation jumped to $25 million that year, and the incentive doesn't stop at the company level. Defense contractors employ hundreds of thousands of workers spread strategically across dozens of congressional districts. Politicians who vote against defense funding risk killing local jobs. The industry spent over $120 million on lobbying in 2022 alone. That's not corruption. That's a business model. Some of the biggest winners of prolonged wars aren't selling weapons at all. They're waiting to rebuild. Reconstruction is one of the most lucrative industries in the world, and the longer a war lasts, the more there is to rebuild, and the more money flows into the company's position to do it. Even while the fighting continues, reconstruction contracts are already being negotiated. The World Bank estimates Ukraine will need over $400 billion to rebuild. American, European, and South Korean construction firms are already positioning themselves for contracts. Several have opened offices in Kiev during the active conflict. You might be asking, how is this legal? Why don't the politicians stop the blatant corruption and end these endless wars? The answer is simple. The politicians are in on the grift. They are the essential middlemen in a system known as the revolving door. The revolving door is the insidious pipeline that connects the Department of Defense, Capitol Hill, and the corporate boards of the top defense contractors, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Boeing, General Dynamics, and Northrop Grumman. This doesn't mean wars are caused by greed. History is more complicated than that. But it does mean that once a war starts, powerful economic forces activate that make ending it less profitable than continuing it. The winners are the shareholders. The winners are the lobbyists on K Street, the executives in Virginia, and the politicians who retire to a life of luxury after voting to send someone else's children to die in a different part of the world. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe.